Hi, it's me, Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and join me at Patreon. Link in the description. They shook hands and hugged again. Mike went up to Masumi's room, quietly walked into the room, and went to where he had hidden the ring. Taking the ring box, he walked over to the bed, sat down on the edge, and looked at her for a long while. Finally, he bent over and kissed her. She stirred a little. He kissed her again. She opened her eyes a little and said, "What time is it?" "It's time to wake up, sleepyhead. Breakfast is almost ready and everyone is waiting on you." "I want to sleep." "Well, I guess that you don't want this either." "What?" "Breakfast in bed, I hope." "No. Something maybe a little bit better. Wake up and see." She rolled over, looked at Mike, then at what he had in his hand, and sat bolt upright in bed. She slowly took the box from Mike, looked at Mike, and opened the box. He asked, "Masumi, will you marry me?" Her arms wrapped around his neck, and their lips met in a deep kiss. Their kiss finally broke, and they just hugged. Mike finally whispered, "Well, will you?" She whispered back, "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Please put the ring on my finger. I can't with you wrapped around me." She broke her hold on him, handed him the box, and he placed the ring on her finger and kissed her again. Looking at the ring, she asked, "Have you talked to my father?" "Yes. Actually, both your mom and dad, just this morning." "And?" "They were both very happy and gave their permission." "Did dad give you a speech?" "He started to. But your mom put a stop to it." "Come on, get dressed. Breakfast is ready." Masumi was slow to get dressed, as she kept stopping to look at the ring and kiss Mike. She was finally dressed, and they headed downstairs. As they walked in hand, Mrs. Matsushita looked questioningly at Mike. Mike smiled and nodded yes. She leaned over and whispered something to Mr. Matsushita. He looked up at his daughter and smiled. Sachiko looked at her sister and said, "Well, it's about time, sleepyhead, and why do you look like the cat that swallowed the bird?" Mr. Matsushita hushed her, stood up, and said, "Everyone, I have an announcement to make. Mike has asked Masumi for her hand in marriage. Her mother and I have given our permission, and from the look on her face, she has said yes. And, Mike, we would like you to call us Shishi, father, and haha, mother, from now on." Before her father had a chance to finish, Sachiko jumped up, ran to her sister, and gave her a big hug and kiss. Then she gave Mike a big hug and kiss. Everyone else got up and offered their congratulations. After breakfast, Mike whispered to Masumi, "We need to call my parents." They excused themselves and went back to Masumi's room to make the call in privacy. As they walked in the door, she turned, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. Broke the kiss and said, "I love you so much." "I love you too. It's beautiful. How long have you had this?" she asked, looking at the ring again. "For a little while. I found it at that little jewelry store down the block from the apartment. I didn't have enough to buy it right away, so the jeweler was kind enough to put it away for me. And I picked it up just before my flight. I wanted to give it to you right after I arrived, but I decided to wait until after the wedding. I didn't want to take anything away from Sachiko's and Jeremiah's special day. You're so sweet." Mike sat down and checked his watch to see what time it was back home. It was late, but Mike knew his parents would still be up, and he wanted to call and tell them. So, he dialed the phone, waited, and finally said, "Hello, Mom." "No, nothing is wrong. Masumi and I have something that we want to tell you and Dad. Can he get on the extension?" "Okay, we'll wait." "Yes, we had a great time. The Shinto wedding was very interesting." "You there, Dad?" "Great. How would you guys like to see a Shinto wedding in person?" "No. Here in Japan." "Oh, maybe next summer." "Yes, I asked Masumi to marry me, and she said yes." The Matsushitas said the same thing. "Here, say hello to your future daughter-in-law." He handed the phone to Masumi, and she had a nice long talk with her future in-laws. Finally, she said, "I love you too, Mom and Dad. Here's Mike." Then she handed the phone back to Mike. "One last thing, Mom. Would you call the Gordons and tell them? I know Masumi would like that. Love you guys too." See you in a week or so. Bye. You should have heard them when they figured out that I was talking about our wedding here next year. Maybe? What do you mean, maybe? If I had my way, it would be tomorrow, Masumi said. Masumi spent the rest of the morning calling her friends and telling them. Mike went back to the kitchen and sat and talked with Mrs. Matsushita. It was like Mike had lived there his whole life. He was treated as a member of the family. Masumi finally came down just before Sachiko and Jeremiah were going to leave on their honeymoon to Australia. After the newlyweds had left, Masumi took Mike's hand and led him to their favorite spot in the garden. She sat and he sat next to her. Taking both of his hands in hers and looking him in the eyes, she said, "Honey, while I was telling my friends, I was also thinking. And I came to realize that I never wanted to be separated from you again for any length of time. I know. I feel the same way. Either I want to come back to the States with you when you go back, or I want you to stay here until it's time for us to go back to school and we'll go back together. You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Very serious." "What would your parents say?" "I know they want me to stay here until just before school starts. Because they now know that after next summer I'll be with you as your wife and living where you do. So, talking them into letting me go back with you in a week or so would be hard. Even though I'm old enough to make my own decisions, I don't want to go against my parents' wishes." "So, you're saying?" "Yes, I would really love it if you would spend the summer here. We could see more of the country. I was going back to the psychology department when I got back, but I could put that off until school starts. And I don't think my parents would mind. I guess it's all up to your mom and dad. We can talk to them after supper tonight. It will only be the four of us." "Okay, but you bring it up." Masumi cuddled up with Mike, and they just sat there together for a while. That evening after supper, the four of them were sitting and enjoying a cup of tea. And Masumi said, "Mom, Dad, we have something we want to talk to you about. I don't ever want to be separated from Mike for any length of time again. And I know that you don't want me to go back to the States much before school starts. We've talked about this, and Mike is willing to stay in Japan until school starts. But we wanted to talk with you before we made a final decision." "Daughter," Mr. Matsushita started, "we love you and Mike very much. Your happiness is very important to us, and we know you are the happiest when you are with Mike. If it will make you happy, Mike is more than welcome to spend the summer here. I think he wants to learn more about our country anyway, and it wouldn't hurt you to learn more also." Mrs. Matsushita added, "The two of you are special to us, and we really want happiness for both of you. And we know how Masumi is when Mike isn't around. So I agree completely. Mike is very welcome to spend the summer." Masumi got up and gave both her parents a kiss. Mike shook Mr. Matsushita's hand and kissed Mrs. Matsushita on the cheek. Masumi then hugged Mike. The next morning, Mike called his parents and explained what was going on. They understood completely and gave their blessing. During the next few days, they made plans as to what they would like to do and talked it over with her parents. Mike wanted to see the southern part of Japan, and Masumi agreed. So, plans were set in motion for them to travel the southern part of Japan for 2 weeks. But before they left, Masumi had a surprise for Mike. The club. Late one afternoon, Masumi told Mike that she wanted to go out with Michelle, but they needed to leave right after dinner, so Michelle would need to come to dinner. Mike was a little apprehensive, but Masumi assured him that it would be fine. And as usual, Masumi was in her usual place, laying on the bed, watching Mike become Michelle. Mike started with the padded panty girdle, white knee-high nylons, sexy demi-bra, and waist cincher. He went a little heavier than normal with his makeup, as it was going to be an evening out, and Masumi asked him to. They had learned a trick to give a good arch to his eyebrows. After putting on his wig cap, he used 2 pieces of surgical tape that were attached just above where he wanted the arch and run over the wig cap to create the type of arch he wanted. He used his good moisturizer, and while that dried, he did his nails. A good foundation was followed by his eye makeup. He did his eyes in a smoky cat eye look that gave him a sexy kitten look. A very nice shade of lipstick followed, with a contrasting lip liner. The blonde wig was next, and the look was that of a sex kitten. He was worried that it was too much, but Masumi was very happy with it. Next came the clothes. Masumi got up, went into the closet, and came back with the dark red pleated plaid skirt and white blouse. He looked at her and said, "Are you sure?" "For tonight, yes. Do you want to go a little more subdued for dinner? With your parents?" "I think so." "All right. Let's go with the blouse, a pair of jeans, and your sandals. That'll be better." Michelle got dressed and they walked down for dinner. This was the second time that Masumi's parents had seen Michelle, and they still couldn't get over how good Mike looked when dressed as Michelle. And they treated her just like they would treat Mike. After dinner, they went back to Masumi's room, and Michelle put on the little red pleated plaid skirt that hit him mid-thigh and her Mary Janes. Masumi also changed into some very sexy clothes. Michelle asked, "Who are you trying to impress, sexy?" "You, my love. No one else. You did that a long time ago. We had better get going before we don't make it out of this room." "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise. And you won't need the rings tonight." They were off to a town about a half an hour south of the Matsushita home. They drove around a little until they found what Masumi was looking for, and she found a place to park. They walked halfway down the block to a gay/lesbian club that every once in a while had a night for crossdressers. And tonight was that night. There was a short line to get in, so the girls waited their turn. When they finally got in the door, the bouncer, who was checking IDs and collecting the cover charge, was the biggest girl that Michelle had ever seen. She could have been a pro football player. She told the girls that only crossdressers and their significant other could be admitted tonight. The girls looked at each other and asked what the problem was. The bouncer again said that only crossdressers and a significant other companion could be admitted. The girls smiled, and Michelle took her passport out of her purse and showed it to the bouncer. She looked at the passport photo, then at Michelle, then at the passport photo, then at Michelle. Michelle, using Mike's voice, then said with a smile, "Yes, that's me in my male mode. And I'll assure you that she is a real girl." Shaking her head, the bouncer said, "Wow. Ladies, go right on in." There were 30 to 40 people in the club. Most were male to female crossdressers, but 1 or 2 were female to male. As Michelle and Masumi walked to a table, all eyes were on them as Michelle was the only non-Asian in the club. The waitress came over and took their drink order, a disc jockey was playing records, and a few couples were dancing. It wasn't long before a couple girls came over and introduced themselves as Mika and Takara. And Masumi invited them to join them. Mika and Takara weren't bad looking as girls. They explained that they were the founders of the crossdressing evening at the club and wanted to welcome the girls. They also said that the bouncer had told them about the American girl and that she just couldn't believe that she was really a guy. Masumi assured them that Michelle was 100% male. They also told Mika and Takara that they were celebrating their engagement. And Mika and Takara bought the couple the next round of drinks. They talked a while longer. Then one of the female to male crossdressers came over and asked Michelle to dance. Michelle looked a little nervously at Masumi. Masumi smiled at her and said, "Go ahead, as long as you save one for me." Michelle danced with him and learned his name was Shiro. It was a little hard for Michelle to get used to following instead of leading, but eventually got the hang of it. The word got around that Michelle was truly a crossdresser and spoke fluent Japanese. And it wasn't long before Michelle had a number of other offers to dance, from both girls and guys. Masumi did get her dance with Michelle. As they were leaving, they told Mika and Takara that they had a really good time and would try and get back to the club before they went back to America. On the way home, Masumi said, "Well, lover, did you have fun?" "Yes. I was a little uneasy with that first dance, especially feeling Shiro's male equipment. But everyone was just great." "How did you find out about this place?" One of Sachiko's friends told her about it. She's a lesbian, and she goes to this club on a regular basis. They were just talking one day, the subject of the club came up, and the crossdressing night followed naturally. "So, Sachiko told me about it, and it sounded like fun." It was fun. The summer in Japan. The next weekend, the two were off for 2 weeks in southern Japan, starting with Okinawa. Masumi had only read about a number of the things that they saw, but seeing them in person brought Japanese history to life for her. Michelle, of course, went along and actually spent a couple of days fully dressed. Those days were fun for both of them and a real eye-opener as to Michelle's feminine side. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.